Good morning. Welcome to the Friday morning real estate chat, where I hope to answer a ton of your questions. So, we are closing on one property today, and that is it. So, it's going to be a really light week for us. Um, Nice and simple. The property is not occupied, it needs a lot of work. And before we go inside it again, we have to get it treated for bugs. There's a lot of them in there. So, that'll be fun. It's a great deal. Other than that, um, we've made a decent amount of progress on starting a fund. I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to start a fund where we're going to raise some capital for buying properties. It's going to be a debt fund. So the fund is going to be the owner of first position mortgages. That's about it. And that feels good. And that has been a thought process of ours for quite some time, but we haven't made any progress on it. We've just been going through the motions, buying the single family homes, building the portfolio, and trying to get that to a point where it makes sense. And I think now we're starting to reach the point where we're doing enough volume where we can explore some other fun options. So I've got a bunch to talk about today, I believe. Hey, good morning. It's been a while. I'm happy you're able to join us this morning. Let's see. I've got some really good comments that we've gotten over the past couple days. Let me see if I can go there real quick. Oh, so a question came in 3 hours ago. It says, "Hello, I've heard that some institutions won't allow a credit card or personal loans to be used for down payments. Who in the seller financing transactions determine if these methods could be used? Is it the owner or the servicing companies?" So, if you are doing a seller finance deal, then whatever you and the seller come up with and decide is fair for all parties is exactly what you can do. So the seller probably isn't going to figure out where your funds are coming from. And as far as using a credit card or a personal loan for the down payment, you can do it. There just has to be an additional step that takes place before that. So, you know, most banks, I don't know. I don't know offhand, but I know they go back a little bit, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days. I don't know how far back they go on the bank statements. However, if you can prove that you have funds somewhere, then you can generally do it. Like I know once I was getting a loan, I just showed them one of my like 401ks or retirement accounts. And since that money had the appropriate amount of money into it, that's all they were going to use as far as like proof of funds. They didn't need me to pull the retirement. So the money didn't actually have to come from that account. They just used that account to show that I had the appropriate funds for the down payment. So if you have somewhere on your balance sheet enough funds to cover the down payment, then you could show the banks that. So while you can use credit cards or personal loans for down payments of properties, it's one of those things that there's another step. So some people will take out the credit card loan, do like a balance transfer, something, I don't know, some or use like plastic.com or something to where they can process the payment for close to their credit limit and get that money in cash somewhere else, or take out a personal loan and you have to season the funds. So if the banks look back 3 months, then 90 days from now, you would be able to use your credit card funds or your personal loan funds in order to actually utilize that as a down payment. Now, if you have an account that has the enough funds for the down payment already, then you could just show that account and you could circumvent that 90-day seasoning process by just showing them that bank account, and then the funds could come from this credit card. But for their records, they're displaying the account with sufficient funds in it. So there's that, but that is a thing that varies by banks. And generally, banks want to have their documents squared away because they plan on reselling this loan to someone else after they originate it. And whenever they're selling these loans, the buyer of these loans wants to see all of the paperwork and come to the same conclusion that the bank did. It's like, okay, this person makes this, here are their pay stubs, here's their bank statements. And they just want to double underwrite or double verify that it is in fact a good loan that can continue to be paid throughout the life of it. So if a bank is going to hold that loan in their personal portfolio, then they might want to see that you have sufficient funds from somewhere, but they're not necessarily going to require as stringent paperwork, because a lot of the banks that are requiring all these documentations and whatnot plan on reselling to the Fannie or Freddie people, and they're the ones with like the most strict guidelines and criterias that you have to abide by and follow in order for them to seamlessly sell to those companies. But again, if they're going to hold that in their portfolio, then that's fine, and they're probably going to have a lot less documentation requirements. And similarly, seller financing, just me going through my head thinking about all the transactions. The sellers are the ones that are going to hold the notes, so they're acting like the bank. So any documentation requirements that they have in order to feel comfortable, they might bring it up. But most times, because they're already intimately familiar with the collateral, which is the property they're selling you, they're comfortable taking it over. And a lot of them aren't necessarily sophisticated enough or take themselves as seriously as an institution would as far as documentation goes, that they're not going to ask you for like a credit report or, proof of funds or anything like that. It's generally going to be a handshake agreement that you then make a corresponding promissory note. And I discussed, there's two different types of seller financing that I'm aware of, either a land contract or purchasing the property and then the seller having that first position mortgage and the accompanying promissory note. So in both of those, it is still going to be facilitated by a title company, but it's not going to be like underwritten by a bank. So all the documentations and the proof of funds or anything like that won't be the same and nearly as stringent. Now, whenever you go to refinance that land contract or the seller finance property, and if you want to put it on a Fannie or Freddie loan, then yes, whoever bank that you use to originate that is going to be the ones that ultimately underwrite you, need that documentation, and decide, what you can or cannot do. Some banks, if they really are unfamiliar with the seller financing process, probably won't even convert you over to long-term debt on a Fannie Freddie loan if it's a land contract. We've had some banks very much so confused by land contracts. But that's a great question. I really appreciate it. Jack Powers says, one of the best channels I've watched. It really helps me see what I need to research more. That's great. I really appreciate that. I made a YouTube short called Buying versus Renting over 3 years. And I pretty much said, if you're not going to live in a house for 3 years or more, if your time horizon is just 0 to 3 years, then you're better off renting and saving funds, unless you're going to turn that property into a rental. In which case, after you move out, you're still going to retain the property, and then it's a good idea again. Chicago Dorset says, great advice. I tell every home buyer, live in it for 3 to 5 years, or we're just wasting money. Yeah, selling something and taking on the fees to purchase or sell a property, like the realtor fees, listing fees, appraisers, all that. It really eats into stuff if you're doing it twice inside of 3 to 5 years. One question about a HELOC. How does a HELOC affect your credit score? I'm not too sure about that. How's it reported? So far the only line of credit that I've had was on a rental property, and it was in the name of an LLC, so it wasn't reported to my personal credit report. I imagine, though, and I'll get some clarity on this and probably make a short about it later on once I find the answer. But I imagine that the answer would be the way that a HELOC operates is very similar to a credit card, as you're only paying interest on the outstanding balance. So I imagine that the HELOC would report, every month or a couple of months with the outstanding balance. And that would be so. As soon as you establish a HELOC, I imagine it'll show up as a new, loan or credit account with the limit being, whatever the line of credit is for. And then the balance would probably be displayed very similar to another credit card. But I'll get some clarity on that with with a couple of people that I know that have one, and see how that impacts the credit score. I think that's a really good question. One that deserves answering. A good answer at that. Bumblebee, good morning. I appreciate seeing you on here. There's so much spam in YouTube comments. I'm trying to go through and find the good questions to answer, and there are just pages of spam comments talking about a whole bunch of nonsense. Man, another credit question. Can buying a home improve your credit? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have a house that shows up on my credit report. So, um, man, I just don't know. That's not something that I could answer. Apparently, I need to research credit scores more. Credit scores are really important. I highly recommend that everybody look into, what goes into a credit score. I didn't look into it until I messed mine up, and then I looked at all the different pieces that makes different parts of it important and how it's calculated. I'm not one to ever fit the appropriate mold of anything. So I would say I strongly dislike credit scores because, you as an individual are significantly, like, the worth is uh, not related. Like, your credit score has nothing to do with your identity or who you are as a human at all. But the banks look at it as a good indicator as to whether you are or are not a good bet when you're getting or receiving loans. So since they value it, since they find it important, since insurance companies value it and find it important, then it's better to have a good one than a bad one. Because if you have any aspirations of generational wealth or using leverage uh, to buy assets, then it's significantly easier if you have a good credit score than if you don't. But this bank rating system aside, I think it's really important to say, hey, it has nothing to do with who you are as a human. It might be a good indication of how you interact with the banking industry, but it's not a good indication of who you are. What is seller financing in real estate? That has a really big uptick with it. It seems like we're getting a lot of questions about seller financing lately. And that might be for good reason. Maybe it's because of interest rates. People that have assets that want to sell them and they see the current banking's interest rates, they say, hey, I would like to sell my own property and collect interest rates comparable to that. Or maybe it's because they are upside down in the property from a payment perspective. I really don't know. There's a lot of different options that make seller financing potentially a good strategy to go after. And I think if you have the ability just to in one transaction buy a property from someone, I think that is the best thing that you can do. However, in the event that you can't, in the event that you're just getting started, you're not necessarily bankable, in the event that you don't have enough for a traditional down payment and you want to get into some creative financing in real estate to kind of give your business a jump start and grow your portfolio without the burden of the banking regulations, if you're inside that 2-year window, I think seller financing is probably the best strategy available to you if you could talk someone into it. Now, I think if you are looking for seller financing, at the end of the day, it is 100% a relationship. So seller financing in real estate is when somebody owns a piece of property, albeit land, a single family home, a multifamily, whatever it is, and they hold the note for you. So you don't go to a bank to get the money. You're asking the seller to finance the property for you. So if somebody listed the property, let's say it was a for sale by owner, they list the property for $100,000. You say, hey, I'll give you, $100,000 for this property. But what I would like is for you to finance the property. I'll give you $10,000 down and I'll pay you, on a monthly basis. The bank says the mortgage at 7% would be, however much, I'll give you that. So seller financing is you and the seller getting together and figuring out the terms that they're willing to sell the property to you on. Now, there's two main ways of doing this, either via a land contract, which is kind of like the real estate version of layaway. You do not actually get the deed to that property until the terms of that land contract are satisfied. And the second process the second way to do seller financing is very, very similar to what a bank would do if it were a traditional purchase, where you would immediately get the deed to the property. And then the seller would have the first position mortgage and the promissory note that outlines the terms of the deal. So in the event that you have the option that you're able to negotiate which of those two options you should go with, I would always recommend the latter and saying, go ahead, get the deed and get a first position mortgage and promissory note with the seller. That's easier for banks to look at as you're refinancing on the back end. Now, seller financing on a land contract, that is a little bit more tricky and nuanced. Make sure that the title company that you're using is familiar with that process, and then also make sure that everything is recorded appropriately. Land contracts can still be recorded. And in the event that you are the seller and that you have a land contract with someone, make sure that if it doesn't work out, if you take the property back, you have to get that land contract released appropriately. We have recently declined buying some properties because there was some unreleased land contracts. Now, someone has since bought that property with an exception to that land contract. So it's not covered under their title insurance, but that's not something that I would recommend. So in the event you're a seller and you do a land contract and the deal falls apart, the person backs out, gives you back the property, make sure that you get that released appropriately, as that is really important. So after that, the land contract, the promissory note, the main points of seller financing that you should know are the purchase price, the interest rate, and the duration of the note. And the duration, there's two different timelines that you should identify. Most times when people want to do seller financing, there's a balloon payment involved. And the balloon payment means, hey, they're going to finance the property for 2 years, but after 2 years, they want you to pay off the full balance of, whatever the terms are. Now, you don't necessarily have to find the full balance to pay that off. You can do a refinance of the property and use a traditional bank, because at this year at that point you've owned the property for 2 years. So you can show the history of that property performing to a lender, and they can see it as more of a safe bet or loan for them because they have 2 years of historic data about how that property is improved. So I would say that is one of the best strategies to use seller financing, is just in a short-term perspective for 2 or 3 years. That way the property is under your control, it's under your care, you're keeping the books for that property. And you're able to then go to a bank and say, hey, this is how the property's performed. It meets your criteria. I'm looking to refinance the property and pay the seller off. So that is one of the ways that these contracts have a duration. And the second is the length that it's amortized. So in the event that you are negotiating terms with the seller, you're going to have the purchase price. That's straightforward. You're going to have the interest rate. That's pretty straightforward. And then for the second part of the duration, you're going to want to know if this is an interest-only loan or if it is amortized over 20 or 30 years. So I would say a lot of people are comfortable with it being amortized. That way some of the principal is being paid off and that loan value is decreasing over a couple of years. But for the most part, if it is interest only, then whatever the purchase price is minus the down payment or whatever that is what you're going to owe at the time of the balloon payment if it's an interest only. So that's pretty much it. The only thing that I may have left off is the down payment, like I just said. So purchase price, down payment, the interest rate, and then the duration of this note. And I would suggest anybody starting out, because banks want to see real estate investors be in the game for 2 years or more before they start counting your rental income as income for you to qualify for the loan. So if you have a W-2 job, then the full monthly payment of that loan is going to count against you on your debt to income, because the bank is not going to be willing to count that rental income if you haven't owned properties or been a real estate investor for 2 years or more. So that's important. And in the event that you find yourself in that 2-year window where you have maxed out your debt to income, you can't on paper afford another rental property because they're not counting any of your rental income, then seller financing is going to be, your best friend. And you're going to be able to seek out properties that meet some criteria that would make it to where people are more prone to entertain seller financing. You can seek those out and you can try and negotiate seller financing so that your balloon could be 2 or 3 years down the road. That way, you have that asset producing for you under your control. You're keeping the books for it. You can make everything nice and tidy to fit the bank's mold by the time that balloon payment is due, so that you can refinance, get that seller the full purchase price, and then keep it moving. So that's about everything that I could possibly say about the actual structure of seller financing. So the 4 points to go over again: purchase price, the down payment, the interest rate, and the duration. And I'm putting the duration in 2 parts. If a balloon payment is due, like how long from now? Is it going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? What is it? And then the second part of the duration is the amortization. How long is that purchase price going to be amortized for? Because cash flow is important when you're going to refinance these. I would suggest a very long duration. We've taken on some properties that are like fully amortized over 8 years. The cash flow is very thin. Now, we did that because the purchase price was so low that we're not going to refinance the property. We're just going to keep the seller financing in place for like 8 years, and then it's going to be a free and clear asset. But it really hampers the cash flow. So in the event that you're a new real estate investor and you are looking to refinance one of these seller finance properties, I would definitely encourage you to negotiate for a very long amortization period up front. That way you can show the most amount of cash flow. Now, the common situations that you should seek out if you're looking for seller financing, I would say any type of high equity asset. So if you see that somebody has purchased a property 10, 15, 20 years ago, then the chances of them having high equity in that property is pretty high, unless you can go through the records and see that they took out like a home equity line of credit or refinanced the property a couple of years ago. And all of this available is very easy to find and very well organized on PropStream. So I will put a link to a free 7-day trial of PropStream. And what I would do with that 7-day free trial to figure out if it's worth it or not is get this criteria, run these different tests, and figure out which properties in your area meet the criteria and try and contact those people. Go really hard. Don't sign up for the free trial until you've got 7 days set aside to where you can try this, test the limits of PropStream, run all different searches, and contact a lot of people. And then figure out if it's worth it. And then keep it. I keep it. I use PropStream a lot because it's so easy to get a massive amount of data and lists pulled of owners that have owned their house for 15 years or more, right? You're starting to lean on that high equity because a lot of appreciation has happened in 15 years. A lot of principal pay down has happened in 15 years. So the chances of you getting a seller finance deal on that are pretty high. Now, you can seller finance a deal on top of a mortgage. So the underlying mortgage, whatever they originally have, that does not have to be paid off in order for you to negotiate seller financing. You're really going to test like the risk tolerance of someone if that's what you're negotiating, because a lot of people don't like having underlying mortgages and then also having a mortgage payment paid to them. But if you can articulate it well, if you explain the process well, that could be an option available to you. You can also, inside of PropStream, pull lists of properties that have no mortgages. Now, sometimes people may have amounts that they owe that wasn't recorded properly attached to these properties. But if it is a cash purchase, if a mortgage was never recorded, then the chances of it being a free and clear property are pretty high. So you can search for all of those. I would look for properties that the person might own, 1 to 5 properties, and they've owned them for more than 10 or 15 years. That is a good list to pull if you're looking for seller financing, because the chances of them being tired of having rental properties are pretty high, but the chances that they like predictable monthly income is also pretty high. So I imagine with a little bit of work, with a little bit of negotiating skills, you could probably convince that owner to sell you a property or all their properties. So I think it's a solid deal. We have recently, I would say we've purchased 2 packages of properties that were seller financed. One was 11 properties and the other was 13. And we were very appreciative for both of those, as both were a good boost to our portfolio. And remember, and I think this is really important, and if you are on your journey to building wealth, this is a skill that you've already hopefully mastered, or you're in for a really difficult journey. And that's that at every avenue, you should be seeking to add value to someone else and solving someone else's problem. Nobody owes you anything, and you're not entitled to anything. It's I don't remember who said it. It was one of these kind of larger, cheesier people, but like success, you have to pay your dues daily or something like that, right? Like you're not entitled to anything. One thing that we've been saying a lot in our company, because when we started, it was just my brother and we don't know what we're doing. We're kind of building the plane, as we're flying it or whatever. What got us here won't get us there, right? So if we want to continue to grow, we constantly have to be changing the way that we're doing things and not get stuck in the way that we already have been. So as you're approaching these people for seller financing, they have to have a problem or some type of situation in their life that you need to solve for. It is not, I would not approach this in a cookie cutter way at all. It's all going to be a relationship, and it's all going to be you convincing them that seller financing this property to you is solving one of their problems, and you're a good bet because, and then all the reasons that you have that you're an up and coming person that they should love to help. So I would get into if seller financing is important to you, if that is going to help you kind of reach that next level, then I would definitely kind of get into the groove of each time you're looking at a deal, each time you reach out to like a for sale by owner or any of that, ask, would you be willing to entertain seller financing? If you find something off market, ask if they would be interested in seller financing the deal to you. It doesn't make sense all the time, but that is definitely a good way to find them. And then just remember on the back end that once they agree to it, remember it's about you building that relationship, you solving their problem, and you becoming an asset to them, not just draining stuff from them. So I think that's just an important mindset as you're approaching it, because relationships are everything. And I would say to go from a place with nothing to somewhere with something, other people are going to help you get there. And your relationships with them are the most important thing you could probably have. Were the packages of properties purchased at 75% of value? Yes, probably more so. So I would say we got really, really lucky. The market turned just in time. The package of 11 that we purchased, we actually did really well on. So we bought all 11 of them for $280,000, $28,000 each. Now these are all extraordinarily old homes. So they were all, I think the newest one was built in like 1905 or something, right? So we normally don't make it a habit of buying these smaller properties on slat or on crawl spaces or like sandstone foundations that were built in the 1800s. That's just a little bit out of our wheelhouse, because we've fielded a lot of complaints about just how uneven floors are, but that's just what happens when these homes are so old. And also in the part of town that we invest in, this package was in a different part, but for the main area that we're in, if you get a home that old, then it was 100% underwater during one of the bigger floods that have happened in the area. Now they're still standing, they're still fine, but it's just out of my comfort level. I've never gotten overwhelmed with craftsmanship when I've walked through any of these homes. So these, back to the 11, we bought them for $280,000. At the time, they're all pretty small homes. And at the time that we purchased them, there was a lot of deferred maintenance on the exterior. They were all in kind of bad shape. The lady that we bought them from, she had built this portfolio with her husband. He passed away, and they have a really cool story. I mean, they bought all of them with credit cards and rehabbed them with credit cards and paid them off. So it was all free and clear. And, so we budgeted to spend like 70 grand on repairing the exterior of these properties, removing a lot of the ivy, removing a lot of the brush, addressing some of the interior deferred maintenance on them, When her husband passed away, she just had a really tough time with contractors, getting people to regularly show up, regularly fix things, and all of that. And it's just not a business that she ever wanted to be in. So she just did it because she had them. And when it was all said and done, like when we had them appraised, they appraised for like just shy of, I want to say like 800,000 or something like that. So the market moved in the right direction right as we were putting that deal together in the area that those properties were. So it was great timing. And then the first one that we did, we bought them for a very similar price. I think it came out to be about $26,000 or $27,000 each. Obviously, this was now we bought those in 2018. So the market has done a lot since then. But yes, at this point, all of those are worth probably in the $90,000 to $100,000 range. And a lot of those we purchased occupied. It was a performing portfolio when we purchased it. Both were performing. Both were, for the most part, fully occupied. I think each portfolio had one property that was vacant and that needed a significant amount of work in it. And then the market has just increased since we've done those deals. So I would say the thing about real estate is that old saying of the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. I think I've never heard about people that I always hear, the market hubbub about what the market is going to do from people that are thinking about getting into real estate or that are currently like doing it kind of as a hobby or like as a part-time thing. But all the people that are full-time, kind of full tilt in real estate that I've ever talked to, one of their biggest regrets, just looking back at their real estate investing career, is that they didn't purchase more when prices were X, right? So even if the market tanks, let's say you buy a house, the market tanks. If you analyze it appropriately, if it's cash flowing, if you have the opportunity to keep a renter in there throughout the duration and it's still cash flow, then you're going to do okay. Test. I'm 50 years old. I don't have the luxury of time to grow my real estate portfolio, so it is better for me to get into multifamily, both small and or commercial. I disagree with this and almost all of the premises of it. So one of my mentors grew his portfolio. I don't know exactly how old he was, but I believe he was in his late 50s or early 60s to start. And I mean, he has several hundred homes now. And then you've got examples like Colonel Sanders, who, started the KFC thing so old. And I know that I'm not 50 yet. I will be one day, Lord willing, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think that you should ever use age or anything else as a reason as to why you can't get started or, anything else. I've said this a lot recently, and obviously I don't know from experience about age and the energy levels or any of that. But I mean, I fully plan on dying with properties under contract, right? I absolutely love what I'm doing. I love it. And I'm going to be buying properties when I'm 50, 60, 70, whatever, however long I live. I'll be buying properties or helping any of my many kids buy properties, right? I don't plan on stopping. And I don't think you probably should either. And I definitely don't think you should view your age as a reason as to why you can't pursue something, right? And when it comes to whether or not you should do single family or multifamily, it is totally a personal preference. So I would say at the end of the day, all business comes down to an ROI. So if one asset class has a return on investment that's significantly higher than the other, sure, take a look at the one that's higher and figure out why it's higher, right? It's perhaps the market, right? Like the return on investment here in the Midwest is significantly higher from the very high populated city centers that are more popular, like the New Yorks and Californias of the world, right? So we get deals for unbelievable prices if you ask one of those fellows. But at the end of the day, the different businesses, it comes down to return on investment. All return on investment being equal, if you could make similar in single family as you can in multifamily, then it just comes down to your personal preference of what types of problems that you want to deal with, right? If you're going to make 18% per year, whether you buy a single family house or a multifamily, or whether you buy a dry cleaning business, the only thing that matters is, are you going to hate the problems that come along with that? And so far, from my exposure to multifamilies thus far, like we don't have, like right now, all of the really large apartment complexes, like 100, 200, 300 unit complexes are being built. They're all new builds. I don't have any experience in new construction. That's not something that I've done. All the existing multifamily in the area, I would say about 90% of it is 4 units, 6 units. The biggest building I think I've ever seen for sale here locally has been like 15 units, right? So I do not like the problems that accompany the 4 units or to 12 unit buildings, right? You have to have a certain amount of volume in order, and you have to have a certain amount of just sheer space in order for people to kind of have their own areas, their own space. Because right now, my experience in 4 units is that if you get one bad resident in there, and screening is hard, you're gonna make mistakes, right? So if you get one bad resident in there, they can make all the other 3 want to move out. It's really tough to judge, and just this kind of intra-tenant drama, I'm not a fan of. So on the single families, when everybody has their own space, if they have a problem with their neighbor, then it's a city ordinance, law enforcement type problem, right? It's not something that I did. It's not something that someone that I put there, right? So there's a lot more autonomy from the resident perspective. And I also just think that the demographic of the people that rent single family homes is far less transient than those that enter the 4 to 12 unit space that we have here in the area. So my answer to this, all in all, is don't let your age be any type of a burden to you, right? If you feel like you should start building something, then you should. And then I would say whatever business you pursue, you're probably going to get pretty similar ROI. And it's just a matter of what problems do you want to deal with. I think that's probably the most important thing. And I would say that is how a lot of people, because yes, money is important. Money is this threshold. You need a certain amount of it to satisfy your lifestyle, right? But after you reach the certain amount that you need, whatever your number is, it really becomes about lifestyle. Do you enjoy what you do every day? Are you comfortable with the problems that you have? Or are the problems that you have ones that you're just not willing to deal with? My wife and I, the first business that we started, we did not like the problems at all. We became pretty miserable pretty quickly dealing with those problems. So even though, sure, it was helping us reach our financial number, it wasn't moving the appropriate lifestyle. So once you satisfy, your lifestyle from a financial perspective, then it's an energy and it's kind of like an energy thing. Do you want to spend your energy on these types of problems? Do you want to have this appropriate or this style of life that comes along with this business? And finding one that you find yourself joyful to have those problems is a real tangible thing. Now, you may have built a business or two. I know I have, where I learned pretty late, like the businesses were already built out when I learned that I did not like them at all. So here now, as far as single family homes go, I am so overwhelmed with gratitude that I get to deal with the types of problems that come along with this. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's a real thing. And that's kind of how I would suggest everybody else kind of view things once you satisfy that financial thing. I got this question, and I still think it is one of the funniest questions. Are there any programs to help us pay off rental properties? I like it a lot. Just putting a renter in them and allowing them and charging them enough to cover all the expenses of the home. And put aside enough for the capital expenditure issues. That's good. Now, one thing that I want to say, let me pull up my spreadsheet really quickly. So early this year, we set the goal in January to buy 200 homes this year. Now, that is a really big number to us. At the time that we set this goal, we had 200 properties that we owned. So we were essentially committing to doubling our business in 1 year, which, it took us from 2017 until the start of 2022 to acquire 200 doors. So it was very uncomfortable. It was very intimidating to set the goal of buying 200 homes. In January, it felt impossible, right? So, like, I set a lot of different goals for our different businesses, for different areas of my life. 200 was the one for the real estate side, right? Quickly, I learned in January or February that this was just too much. I actually went and adjusted and way throttled back all of the other goals that I had and decided to focus on the acquiring 200 because it was going to take a crazy amount of energy in order to increase the deal flow, increase the private lender network that we had, to really ramp up our refinances and pretty much increase our entire support of those 200 homes while also not neglecting the 200 that we already had. So it was quite the ride. But so far this year, after today, we will have purchased 179 doors. So, yep, today we're buying number 179. Now we're going to close very few properties here in November. But the fact that we are even close to the 200 number is kind of surreal to me, right? So in January, we purchased 11 homes, and I was exhausted. I remember that. And I remember thinking to myself, because in order for us to purchase 200 in a year, we need to be focusing around 17 doors per month is what we need to close. So in January, we closed 11. In February, we closed 15. And in March, we closed 13. So for the first quarter, we were off track. And I remember thinking to myself that I've never worked harder, right? I've never, I didn't fully understand the amount of energy and effort that this goal was going to take. And it was discouraging, to say the least. I truly didn't think that we were going to come anywhere close. I thought to myself, this is just too much. But then in April, we closed on 19. So April was the first month that we were on track, or that we closed enough, but we had lost ground that we needed to make up, right? In May, we closed on 27 properties. In May, after closing on 27 properties in 1 month, I felt better, right? And then in June, we closed on 17 properties. And after closing 27 in May, closing the 17 in June didn't feel so bad, right? It felt more manageable, and we were starting to pick up some steam. In July, we closed on 25 properties. In August, we closed on 19. Again, 19 felt light after closing on 25. Also in July, we bought a business. And in August, we closed on 19 properties, and we ran another business that is in the real estate industry, but something completely different that we were not accustomed to. Now the business, there are already employees there. We were fortunate enough that all the employees stayed. We all get along. It's been fantastic. I'm super appreciative of all of them. And so now, instead of like just doing this 200 property goal, we've also acquired a business. We spent 450,000 on that business. So in September, we purchased 19 doors, and in October, we purchased 12. So right now, we are likely not going to work. And today, this will be, so far, we've purchased one in November. And we might not make it to 200, and that's okay. I won't be frustrated or heartbroken or sad at myself if we don't hit that. But I think we will. And even though we only closed on 12 in October, and I think we might close on like 5 in November, December is going to be a huge month for us. And all the properties that I'm putting under contract right now, I'm not planning on closing in November. I'm planning on closing December 9th. It's going to be a huge day. I'm trying to stack a bunch of properties to close then. We're coordinating. We're doing a couple of refinances, and we are also getting some new, private lenders on board in December. So we're going to have a massive December. So right now, in order to get to 200 doors, we need, I don't know why math is hard, 179, 21 more doors. And I think we could do that. So if we close on 5 in November, then that'll take it down to 16 doors that we need to close in December. And with the size of the refinance that we should be closing then, we should be set. So we're looking to refinance about 55 properties, which is going to hit in December. And I think that's going to really carry us through to the 200. And that's exciting. So, I mean, the lessons that I've learned from all of this is, when things got tough this year, so previously, if things got tough, I was just able to start putting in some 16-hour days, some 18-hour days, and take care of it, right? Like last year, we had a couple of times where a friend of mine and we just kind of rolled up our sleeves and rehabbed about 3 properties kind of on our own, right? And that solved the problem that we had. And, this year, as we were growing, as we've purchased the business, we have grown. We've got, I want to say 11 or 12 employees at the moment. And when we have started having issues, I can't just roll up my sleeves and work all day and take care of things anymore. It has to be a group effort. And, having a really solid team around you to help you out that, is truly interested in your success. Because, one of the things that we're kind of sensitive to is if we are winning, we want our whole team to win, right? So having the good team, getting the support, and kind of leading charge on a project when we realize that we're falling short in an area has been really rewarding. And even though I can't kind of roll up my sleeves and do it all on my own anymore, we can get a significant amount more done collectively as a small team than I ever could as an individual. And that's just really cool. I'm super thankful for everything and everyone. Good morning. Quit and shop. Morning, Ryan. Pros and cons of Section 8. I think this is a great video. I think that's a great question. And it will be a great video if I answer it appropriately, because this is something that I'm kind of, a little bit frustrated about at the moment, right? So, we do not accept Section 8 currently. We buy properties where people are already on Section 8, and we don't ask them to leave or anything, right? We honor the lease, and if they want to stay there, we'll continue working it. But we have a really difficult time with our local Section 8, and we get failed on every inspection, and they give us a certain amount of time to fix these issues. And in the event that we do not fix these issues in that allotted time frame, then Section 8 has the opportunity and the ability to abate your rent. Now, abate doesn't mean stop paying you until you fix it. You're not going to get paid again until you fix it. And you know, the most bitter taste I have in my mouth about Section 8 is whenever this, the 2020 March 2020 came around. We had a Section 8 property that needed a new roof. We said, no problem, we're going to replace this roof. So we got on the schedule of the roofer. That's when the prices of OSB were skyrocketing. That's when everybody was booked out. Nobody knew what was happening. Labor shortage started. It took probably 2 months. We tarped it. We made it livable, but it took us about 2 or maybe 3 months to get that roof on. Once that roof was on and the reinspection happened, the rent gets turned back on. We were not paid for any of those 3 months that were missed. So fundamentally, I oppose renting or providing any goods or services to any organization that has the ability to decide that they cannot pay me for those goods or services provided, right? It seems like a no-brainer. And I don't think that that is a good business model. And I don't think that is something that should be done. Now, I 100% understand that there are kind of bad actors in this space. And you've got people that just defer maintenance endlessly and try and, do bare minimum fixes. But all of the Section 8 properties, let's not use words like that when I'm trying to prove like a real point, right? So a lot of Section 8 properties where they have been Section 8 properties for decades, it's very common that they have multiple layers of paint on everything, including the outlets, the light switches. There's a way to pass the inspection without providing a good product, right? So we have been under contract for multiple properties when they came up for auction, because that's the way that the owner decided he wanted to sell them, was via auction, not just like a normal sell. And these were all Section 8 properties, and they have been for a very long time. We had to back out of all 4 of them because they were completely in disrepair. They were passing the Section 8 inspections because of the manipulation of the system, doing the check boxes, but I wouldn't let anyone in my family live in any of those homes. So if Section 8 is applied on any mass, I feel like it's going to kind of degrade the quality of house available for rent on the stock, because it becomes, form over function. You have to check this box for Section 8, so long as you want to receive your rent, and it doesn't really matter the quality of work, right? And that's frustrating to me. The pros are, I guess, that if you are behaving appropriately to them, then you're going to get paid on the first of every month by an organization that is not going to be late on their payments, right? So unless we're not set up to be able to send out someone to do one of these Section 8 inspections with like a 10, 15-minute call ahead, right? We just don't have, like a floating person around to do that. And then another thing that is really difficult with Section 8 is there are things that the resident is responsible for, and there are things that the owner of the property is responsible for. Now, we have like multiple instances where on our Section 8 properties, the resident has destroyed a decent amount of stuff, and they do not report that these things are damaged. So when the inspection comes around, it looks like we have not fixed things. But in reality, we have just like someone that's not cooperating with us and not letting us know when something needs to be fixed. So it turns out she just wanted out of the house, and she just wanted the property to fail. But she could have used words and just told us that she didn't want to live there anymore, and we would have been fine. But I guess that's not how you get placed in another property afterwards. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I do know that I'm just fundamentally opposed to an organization deciding whether or not we get paid. And on the off hand that someone that's pro Section 8 hear this, like I fully understand, or if someone that doesn't know the ins and outs of the Section 8 process, they hear that, landlords, property owners don't accept Section 8. And it seems like this thing that doesn't have a heart. But I couldn't disagree more. I would say working with Section 8 is really difficult because at the end of the day, they hold the keys. We have recently sent emails, phone calls, and all sorts of things to get re-inspected, and we just haven't successfully gotten on their schedule. And if you don't successfully get on their schedule for the re-inspection, then your rent starts getting abated. So if we don't have to rent to Section 8, then it doesn't make sense for us to take on the administrative burden to do things differently for these properties, to try to fit into a program. Now, when I was first starting in this area in 2017, Section 8 had significantly higher rents than you could get on the market. So whereas you might be able to get $750 for like a 2-bedroom, Section 8 was paying $850. So I could see how you were incentivized to follow all these rules. And with the extra $100 per month, you could afford the administrative tasks of getting all of this in order. But as the market rates increase, Section 8 kind of lags behind. So now there are many instances where the actual market rent is higher than you can get from Section 8. So until Section 8 kind of corrects that, and it's slower moving, so they'll adapt to the market at some point and get higher than the market rate. And when that happens, maybe it does make sense for people to do Section 8 because you get paid timely, and Section 8 will pay higher than you can get on the market. But in the event that it is all equal, the rent is going to be the same, there's not going to be any additional compensation to jump through the program's hoops, I wouldn't suggest it to anyone. And I think just this mass program, like we're also in the single family home space, right? So there are, I read an article recently that was published in our local newspaper talking about how they want to look at source of income discrimination, saying that Section 8 is a source of income, just like Social Security and other kind of pension benefits, retirement, disability, all the other money that goes to individuals from governments for something. They should say it's the same and it should count the same, and that the property management companies or the landlords shouldn't be able to say no to Section 8 rents. And if it was income like Social Security income or disability income, where there are no strings to those funds on the back end, then I would agree. Income is income. If it's cash, it's money, right? You can spend it. And it's the same for renting in the home. But Section 8 is not income. It is this entire program that you have to participate in, follow their rules, and it's forcing the business to take on the government, the private business to take on the government as a client and abide by all these rules. And to anyone that kind of hears that and says, well, this person just doesn't want to, do the inspections or the repairs. It's not that. It's not that at all. And yeah, that's my thoughts on it. So I have zero issue in repairing a property. I want all of these properties to last us 50, 70, 100 years. I would love to pass down these properties to my brother and I's kids in perfectly good orders, with no deferred maintenance, with residents that love properties. I'm not trying to skirt fixing things. I'm not trying to cut any corners, but being forced to accept a program that I have no interest in jumping through their hoops, That's fundamentally different than caring for a home, and it is not in the slightest bit discriminatory. What's up, man? It's been a while. I hope all's well with you. Yeah, thank you for asking it. Excellent points on Section 8. I would say that if a person wanted to make Section 8 their whole landlording model, they could do it with less frustration. I think so. I think if you built a business model around their hoops, then it's just the typical, MO of the business. Um, and I agree with that. But, and I don't necessarily know of anyone that has built their entire model around accepting Section 8. So I really can't speak to it. But I do know that if you set out to build a business around a particular set of rules, then it's for sure possible. And if that's your main thing that you want to do, and if that's what you're comfortable with, great. But yeah, I mean, the way that, when I first started, I thought to myself, hey, scalability is great to focus on. So we don't have a phone number that you can call and get a person. The businesses that I've worked previously, it seemed like somebody ended up just answering the phone all day long. And it's not a good use of anyone's time. And it's not the most effective way to let people know of an issue. Now, if you are looking for an exception, if you are trying to win over someone's favor and and get someone to listen to your story, then yes, a phone call is probably the most effective way to get that exception made for you. So I could see how us not having a phone could be frustrating, but we're so streamlined. We are all online. We have a portal. Um, we have a number that you could text that all of our people can see. We have a fantastic system for people to schedule work orders. And all of the ways that you have to interact with Section 8 completely destroys the way that we have built our business. We do not have someone monitoring a phone to get these call ahead, 15, 20-minute call ahead notifications. Yeah, it's just apples and oranges. It is trying to shove something that doesn't fit into our business model. Solid rant on Section 8. Thanks. The two guys in New York who wrote the Section 8 Bible did, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, might be New York. I am all about housing being affordable. Nothing makes me happier than taking these vacant, distressed homes, which Dayton is full of, and turning them back into like functioning units of society again, right? And generally, when we do that, because it needs so much work, we're able to keep the cost down, and subsequently, we're able to keep the rent down. I was talking to an investor recently, and they saw all of our properties for rent, and they're like, "You're under market." It's like, well, that's okay, right? Like, we're not trying to get top dollar for all these properties. So, but I don't think that government programs makes things affordable. I think they do probably exactly the opposite, under the guise of affordability. And I think in the event that Section 8 or any of these programs wants to force Section 8 funds on the owners of private property, then a better solution would be the city using those funds to build, maintain their own properties, either apartment complexes, or if they want single family homes to accept Section 8 vouchers, then they should build their own single family homes. I think it's a little bit of an overstep, to force people to interact with your program with their private property. It would be a bad decision, but if I wanted to not let anyone live in any of these properties, then I think that's well within my right. It'd be a very bad decision. Horrible decision. What's up? I am no myth. I am right here, and I am definitely no legend. I have a long, long history of tons of mistakes. However, I am, in fact, and very proudly, a man, and I am me. So I can agree with most of what you said. All right. Well, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and post those in the chat. Man, I didn't get this disclaimer rolling. I guess I didn't give any advice, though, really, just my own opinions. And I don't even know how much this thing does. So, not legal or professional advice. I also recently got a new insurance policy on myself, and they asked, the questions about whether or not you are. I don't know. Somehow the YouTube channel came up, so they had to go to some consideration and kind of go up the chain and all. So they checked out the YouTube channel and saw what all I was talking about, and they didn't make any suggestions on things that I should or shouldn't do, and it covers the YouTube channel as well. So I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. They didn't. Nobody said, "Hey, make sure you got this disclaimer rolling all the time," or "Make sure you say this." I kind of know words of wisdom, so we'll see. We'll see how important it is in the event that it ever comes up. So last night, I got a text message from a friend of mine that I really respect and appreciate, and they said, "Hey, you should make a reaction video on this article." And I don't know about making a reaction video, but I would like to go through this article with you. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens, right? So this is based in Cincinnati, which is local. It says Demetrius Harper Edwards and his girlfriend uh, Sarai, not sure, spent the pandemic lockdown dreaming of owning a home. They saved for a down payment and worked to repair their credit. That's good. I think that's what everybody should do. Whether you want to buy a home or not, you should repair your credit and save up. I was literally on that couch just going crazy with the paperwork. Who was pregnant with her now 2-year-old son. Also has a twin 8-year-old daughters. She's a seamstress and sells her own design. He's a carpenter. Israel says buying a place would be especially meaningful for her, since as far as she knows, no one in her family ever has. That's cool. That's cool. Saving money for a down payment and repairing your credit. That's great, especially if you're the first in your family. I mean, that's a big deal. My mom and my grandmother, they were actually born in Alabama. She assumes her ancestors were slaves and says home ownerships would change the face of your family. It means that I can leave a place for my children. It can take some stress off of my children's shoulders. Um, of course, home prices skyrocketed during the pandemic, worsening a long-term shortage of affordable housing. Now, higher mortgage rates and inflation are putting ownership out of reach for many. I agree with that. I think there's other articles out there that talk about how there's just not enough homes for people that want to buy homes, and that stretches across all um, all socioeconomic things. It's not just low income. I mean, they're like new construction needs to produce record breaking numbers year over year in order to make up for the detriment or the shortage that we currently have of all homes. So yeah, affordability is becoming an issue because um, there just aren't enough homes. And also, I mean, I think, as time continues, it gets worse because people, there's more people. However, I've got to say, I'm a little bit confused by this article so far because I'm not sure how many kids you have or your, ancestral things have anything to do with buying a home or saving up for one. But this year, the couple's dream suddenly got more real when they received a letter saying that the house they've rented for 4 years had changed hands. It was among 194 homes owned by a California-based investment firm that had gone under. Now the letter explained a local development agency was their new landlord, and it wanted to help them buy the house. That's fun. So it's just the universe playing out, Harper Edwards said. Like, okay, you want your shot. Here it is. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I also want to go back up real quick and say about this. It means that I can leave a place for my children. It can take some stress off my children's shoulders. I don't disagree with that by any means, but I also am not so sure that I think I think generational wealth is important. I think leaving an inheritance to your kids is important. I think real estate and owning your house is a way to do it, but by no means do I think it's the best way. All right. It's a risky bid to take on the racial wealth gap. All right. So we have jumped. Is this the same article? Okay. So just to frame this appropriately, they wanted to buy a house. It was bought by someone else, and they want to help them buy it. And now we're talking about the racial wealth gap. All right. The owner of the homes is the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority, known as the Port. It's run by Laura Brunner, who says she was shocked last year when her staff discovered after months of digging that institutional investors own at least 4,000 houses in the county. Most of those houses were bought for cheap after the 2008 housing crash, then turned into rentals. This national trend picked up pace through the pandemic, with institutional investors buying a record share of single-family homes, more than a third of sales in some cities. Brunner says this threatens to exacerbate the racial wealth gap in Cincinnati, where only a third of Black residents own homes. Here and nationwide, most investor home purchases are in low to moderate income and minority neighborhoods. Well, this took a spin. All right. They're taking a significant amount of inventory off the table and saying people don't get to own homes anymore, she says. So they're really capturing them as rentals. They're taking a significant amount of inventory off the table and saying people don't get to own homes anymore. Okay. I don't know who says they don't get to own homes anymore. And I think this is just the way that the market cycle works, right? Like, I think an important backstory here is Ohio. I mean, the Midwest. I imagine Cincinnati is probably different. All markets are different across the nation, but I imagine that Cincinnati suffered something similar to Dayton, where there are still 10,000 vacant homes here in Dayton. I don't know the numbers for Cincinnati, but it makes sense that if everybody's house gets foreclosed on, if they lose it, like 2008, where there's a massive amount of owner-occupant foreclosures on the market, that investors come in and purchase properties. and turn them into rentals because they have the means to own that asset. Now, I would be really, really interested in hearing the number of rentals that are in their whole overall portfolio. So here in Dayton, we have uh, about 75,000 homes, I believe, of which 50% are rentals. So that makes about 35,000 homes being rental properties. So 4,000, and I know Dayton is significantly smaller than um, Cincinnati. So 4,000 homes being owned by institutional investors is probably a pretty small percentage. And it is probably a smaller percentage than realized. So if you take that into Dayton, and even though Cincinnati is larger, Dayton has 35,000 single family home or just 35,000 rental units. I don't remember whether it's just single family homes or it includes multifamily. But 4,000 units is a little over 10%. 10% of your area's homes, rental homes, I mean, it'll be less of your overall homes owned in general. That's not a hateful number, especially when you consider like a lot of the properties that were purchased for really cheap. There's a reason that these homes are cheap, and they're not going to be move-in ready, especially after somebody gets foreclosed on. In fact, foreclosures are generally some of the most distressed assets that you could take over because whoever is on their way out isn't necessarily thrilled about getting foreclosed on their home. And we have purchased a significant number of properties that owner occupants would not have purchased. Not all people that are looking to own homes are in fact handy or able to make the repairs themselves. So it's probably just in the life cycle for institutions or people with capital to step in, buy these homes, um, and address the deferred maintenance. Brunner says large investors are also more likely to raise rents, evict tenants, and let houses fall into disrepair. She accuses them of treating local properties like a cash cow, extracting profits, but not investing enough to properly maintain them. So, I mean, raising rents is something that happens because we're on an inflationary financial system. Every year that passes, the dollar is worth more, right? That's how the system is designed. So I know the Federal Reserve says that they shoot, or the historical average of inflation is about 3.22% per year. Here lately, because of the pandemic, because we've printed more money than ever, that number is significantly higher. Everybody raises funds on everything, right? So no matter how good I am at paying my taxes, it doesn't prevent uh, the municipalities from increasing taxes. No matter how good of a job I do at paying my insurance, it doesn't prevent the insurance company from raising the cost of insurance, right? The underlying dollar is what is, lessening or cheapening or dampening, whatever you want to call it. So that's what's causing that to happen. And, evict tenants, that has to be on a basis that is upheld by the court. So most evictions that happen, the court gets the final say as to whether or not the person is evicted. And generally, so long as payment is made, eviction is not a real thing. So eviction doesn't happen without basis. And eviction is generally due to either non-payment or not keeping the property up appropriately. Treating the properties like a cash cow, extracting profits but not investing enough to properly maintain them. I don't know. It sounds like I don't know. I don't really agree. If you look at all homes, I would say a lot of homes have deferred maintenance on them. It's actually pretty uncommon for any house to be free of deferred maintenance because deferred maintenance, is expensive. Yes, I disagree 100% with property owners not fixing things when they need to be fixed. Really confused about the cadence of this article. So when the California company went under, the port moved in to buy up its large properties scattered around Cincinnati. It's a first. She doesn't know of any other public agency like hers to do it. Oh, so if they went under, then they weren't taking any profit. They weren't making money. They were losing money. They couldn't afford anything, not just the homes. Brunner says the agency outbid 12 other investors, taking off $14.5 million in debt for those 194 homes. It has since paid $2 million towards fixing them up. Yeah, I think that's the thing about real estate that not a lot of people realize is, I mean, yes. So if you take all of the items of any home ever, like the hot water heater, it's going to last 15 years and it costs $1,000 to replace. If you take all of the items like that, the roof, the driveway, the siding, all of it, and you extract it over the lifetime of ownership, and if you want to put enough money aside per month in order to handle all of those things as they arise, it is very, very difficult to do that. Most people if you add that layer of financial planning to it, it makes qualifying and maintaining a home, like of being able to afford to buy a home is one thing, then being able to afford to maintain a home is another. And even some investors get that wrong. But I mean, they've already paid more than $2 million of fixing them up. Good for them. It's probably needed. I mean, packages are packages for a reason, because it makes sense to sell things for full retail if they don't have any deferred maintenance on them and if they're truly move-in ready. A package generally means that you're going to have a lot of deferred maintenance that you need to address. If we have a chance to fight back on this really predatory practice, there was no question that we had to do it. So far, I haven't heard anything predatory. So far, I heard that a company that shouldn't have bought homes tried to make a go at, rents. It seems like they did a really bad job managing them. Seems like they couldn't afford to upkeep them, and it seems like they went under and returned to somebody that does have the ability to do it. Rental housing investment is a booming business. Nationally, large investors own just a sliver of the market, says David Howard, executive director of the National Rental Home Council. He rejects the notion that the industry is predatory and says it's responding to a need for rental housing, especially with inflation and higher interest rates making it more affordable or more difficult for many to buy a home. And then they showed this house, which has a new roof. So somebody is trying. It's got replacement windows. Somebody's trying. It's got this thing tucked up and it's trashed out. A lot of properties, once somebody moves out or gets evicted, this is how it looks. I'm really confused as to the structure of this. So we heard about the lady. We heard about the fact that she's got kids, what they do for a living. And then we heard that she might be kind of in the lineage of some slaves and the racial wealth gap. And now we're talking about homes again. We're entering a period of time where I believe that there will be a greater demand for rental housing, Howard says, and I think the industry has an important role to play. Yeah, I agree. Real estate investing has been a booming business through the pandemic as skyrocketing home prices forced many to keep renting, and average rent reached a record high. But analysts say the growing share of investor-owned homes has helped push out first-time home buyers. I don't know. Partly in response to such criticism, Howard says some investors are starting to help tenants who want to become owners by, for example, reporting on-time rental payments and sponsoring financial literacy classes. It's a challenge to fix up homes and keep sale prices low. The port's purchase price per home averages out to be about $78,000, but the amount it will sell them for depends on how much it has to spend to fix them up. And once the agency was able to look inside all 194 homes, it was clear many needed a lot more work than expected. What a well-built home. Look at that subfloor. These are massive, massive boards. So homes that were built like this, they can withstand a hole being in the roof for a very, very long time. Some of these vacant properties that we have purchased have had holes in the roof for decades, and we go in and there's not that much damage done to the interior, especially the floor. You might have like a hole the size of the hole in the roof, in the floor directly below. But because these boards are hardwood and not like OSB, like what's used now, where OSB, it's just a bunch of compressed pieces of wood. So if a part of that OSB gets wet, it's just a matter of time before that entire board is gone, right? This hardwood is not that way. So it's a sturdy house, is what I'm saying. Facilities manager Ron Schaus offers a tour of a rehab underway at one level, 3-bedroom home. In the kitchen, the contractor's pulling up nails from a saggy wood floor with a large hole. I don't know about that. I don't know about that assessment. Floor's rotten. Pulled it up. It's more rotten than we thought. Cabinets are rotten. His original estimate for repairs was $10,000, but that will go up to include things like new cabinets. New cabinets for a home, about $2,000 to $4,000. That's on the entry level cabinets, not like the higher end home cabinets. Homes with tenants still in them have also needed work. There were broken furnaces, leaky roofs, mold. Mold is one of those things that's everywhere all the time. In fact, if you're buying a home, you have to sign a little thing that says, hey, this is acknowledging that mold is in every home and everywhere always. Mold exists in the air. Now, mold thrives and grows in places where there is either an active water leak or just not enough air circulation. Derek Davidson and Carolyn Perkins have been in their home for more than 5 years and would have appreciated the low rent of $700 a month, but they say they've spent a lot of their own money on repairs and relied on this dad, a retired contractor, and that work needs to be done. The roof would leak, the plumbing and electrical all need to come out. Davidson says some front porch steps are rotting out, and they've complained about having only a subfloor inside with no finished flooring on top. One of our kids ended up with a bad splinter. Expensive rehabs to fix problems like all these will set up a brutal numbers game. So far, the port isn't using public subsidies to fund any of this. It plans to make back from the money renting and eventually selling the homes, but the whole point is to keep rentals affordable and sales prices low enough that people can pay. The port also needs some tenants who are ready and able to buy, so it's partnered with a local nonprofit that specializes in just that. It only works if people are able to buy the homes. Man, this article is trying to cover everything. Out of all the port tenants so far, a couple of dozen or more have expressed interest in buying, though it may take years for someone ready. So far in this article, it went from someone in California to now someone local, and now they're speaking highly of the people local. Yes, the California people went under. They were doing a bad job, right? But, at this point, they've abandoned the thought process of it being bad that people are doing this, and they're actually disproving themselves because this port, whoever they are addressing deferred maintenance, kind of going into the face of the first thing they said about it being more common for institutional investors to allow deferred maintenance to be collected. And I'm still not sure how race has anything to do with this or a racial wealth gap. Still, Bush is excited about the potential. In recent years, she's watched the frustration as low-income families trying to buy homes make multiple offers on many months only to lose out again and again to investors. The investors have cash on hand. They can close within 10 days, she says. They can do all the things that makes both the real estate agent and the seller happy. When the port sells to its renters, CEO Brunner hopes to control the entire process, ideally issuing its own mortgages at lower rates. I mean, hey, if you want to do that, by all means, like if you want to seller finance these properties at lower rates, go for it. That's your right to do. Brunner acknowledges that 200 homes is just a sliver of the market. She wants the port to buy more and would like to see the program become a national model, though she isn't sure how many other cities have an agency like hers that can finance enough money. For now, though, among the first on track to buy their homes next year are the Harper and Edwards. He's dealing with a couple of old payday loans that has applied for student relief debt. I'm checking off all these boxes, and I'm just like, oh, I did think I was going to be able to do that. But he's been told he qualifies to move ahead with the process. He says one house has been passed down for 60 years. If this all works out, he says maybe he'll buy another place one day and become a landlord himself. Well, that completely confuses me of why they try to bring in so many different things. The racial wealth gap they never addressed. This whole article was nonsense. That's my reaction to it. the things that it started saying in the beginning, it supported the opposite towards the end. I'm still confused. Uh, my dad, also from Alabama, and that's my biggest thing with the media, right? Is like, why would you say this in this case, right? Why would you bring up slavery in this case? Like, I know off the top of my head three black men in Cincinnati that own 50 or more rentals. The odds of them also having slavery in their ancestry is high. But why is it showcased with negative connotations rather than positive? All of these articles that try to pull on your emotional thing is is really crazy. And this whole article, I mean, it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually say anything because somebody else that's an institution is being able to take over this property. So this bad company that folded because they weren't doing a good job with their own businesses financials, with the renters financials, because they were evicting a lot of people, meaning they didn't collect enough rent, meaning they weren't making enough repairs. They went under and sold all of their assets to another institution who is trying to do a little bit better. That sounds like the free market to me. That sounds like capitalism at work. Now, whether the company wants to sponsor some financial classes to help people buy their own homes or not, I mean, it's their own thing to do. If they want to do that, more power to them. Oh, that's funny. I've heard that. Let's see here. Are you a pro flipping properties? We never did. We have sold our first. We just did. We flipped it. We are under contract right now. So that's about it. Let's see here. Have you seen local appraisals come in lower lately as the national market has slowed? No, our appraisals are still coming in appropriately. So right now, I mean, we're in a gap where appraisals could come in lower at some point. Look, appraisals are always this thing that kind of lags behind. So we went through a pretty serious, I would say, as the market was increasing, we tried to sell one of our 4 units, but the appraisal didn't come in high enough because, like I mentioned, I didn't like appraisals. It took about 18 months for those appraisals to be kind of firing on all cylinders and coming in appropriately to sell these things. So I imagine that appraisals will also kind of be lagging from an 18-month perspective from this. However, I will say that I have not seen our market slow. One of the most important indicators that I would say is necessary is the inventory. The inventory is really low. In fact, there was some kind of panel at UCLA saying that in order just to get back to normal levels, the the inventory needs to triple. The current inventory needs to triple just to get back to the previous norm. So we have very low inventory, and because of that, I think we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. So right now there are a lot of properties listed. If they've been listed for a very long time, it's because there's something fundamentally wrong with them, right? It's also a good example to use from that article in that an owner occupant is not going to buy it. It's going to need too much work. One that most normal owner occupants are not going to have the means, the knowledge in order to do this and rehab it. So, and they also want more money than that house is worth. It's just trash. Now, if something is priced appropriately, if that same house goes on the market for 10,000 instead of 40,000, it'll sell. It'll sell real fast because there's enough meat on the bone for somebody to go in, make all the repairs, and then sell at a reasonable rate to somebody that wants to live there, or for somebody that wants to do like a live-in flip. They could do that, you know. So that's cool. Now, I would say that even on the other side, like here locally at least, if you like our flip, we listed it for pretty high. There were other properties that were listed that were bigger but dated that sold for more or that were listed for more. But we came in where we thought it was reasonable, and we also thought that it was high, but not too high. And we went under contract like inside of a day because we didn't cut any corners. We rehabbed that place very nicely. It was our first one that we've done. So we took great care. So I've also seen the higher end prices go very quickly, so long as it's actually priced reasonably. So I think when people say that the market is slowing, I just don't necessarily agree. I would say it's slowing because the inventory is getting lighter and lighter. And the people that are now listing, where people are citing like MLS price decreases or MLS time on the market being longer, then they're using these bad sample sizes where the properties are in fact like there's something inherently wrong with them, which is why they can't sell. I think everything worthwhile is still that. Also, tenants can escrow rents with the court when landlords refuse to do repairs. Yes. And we have had that happen to us because something fell through the cracks. She was well within her right. She's still a resident today. I mean, she's very happy with us, but she complained about something. And this was when I just took over property management for myself. And I made a really big mistake in that I failed to do it. I asked somebody to do it and never followed up. I asked another person to do it and then never followed up after she complained again. So while I was telling or asking contractors to do this for me, it was never actually completed. And ultimately, she sent us to escrow, which is exactly within her right and exactly what she should have done. I was very appreciative, and I told her thank you for going through this the right way and doing the legal process appropriately. And again, she's still a resident with us. She just recently signed another renewal. There's no hard feelings between us. I didn't perform as I was supposed to, and subsequently went to escrow. And fixed it. Love this. Sorry about filling that up. Just wanted to get rid of what the other person wrote. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I'm not large enough to have somebody just sitting here moderating and blocking stuff, but it's only like once out of every like 3 or 4 months that somebody comes on the live stream and does something silly, which I don't mind. The internet's full of nonsense, and you love this, which is encouraging. Also, landlord's evil. One day I want to be a landlord myself. Yeah. Now, as far as generational wealth goes, I mean, home ownership is not for everybody. And I mean, if you are really struggling financially, like doing work on homes is really expensive. So if you have like barely just enough money to qualify for a house, and if you're spending most of your money on your mortgage payment, you're in a really tight spot. And whenever that roof comes down, you're going to need to figure out how to come up with 5, 15, 20 grand, whatever it might cost for a roof in that area, which is a really tall order for someone that could just barely qualify for a house. And then that could lead into even more severe, financial consequences. So, I mean, improving yourself, doing things like the article talked about at first, like intentionally saving for a down payment, intentionally repairing your credit. I mean, if you do these things, it's just a matter of a couple of years before you can compete with anybody else offering things, right? One of the things that I strongly dislike about this entire racial conversation, and whenever you look back, is, you've got one hand, you can read an article talking about the racial wealth gap, and it'll say, hey, it's going to take like 230 some years for, the racial wealth gap to close or something like that. But then you've got other things. Dave Ramsey did like the largest study of self-made millionaires ever to be conducted. And he said on average, I think it's like somewhere between I think it's like 90% of millionaires never inherited anything, right? It takes on average 7 years for someone to become a millionaire if they start out and they're intentional and they're constantly working on themselves and improving those things, right? On average, it takes 7 years for someone to become a millionaire. So both of those things cannot be true, right? It can't take 238 years to solve this racial wealth thing if it only takes an individual 7 years to become a millionaire if they so set out to do so. And I mean, you as an individual, all of this should be looked at from an individual perspective, not from a racial perspective. If an individual wants to change, they have all the opportunities and ability to do so themselves. If they have access to the internet at this point, it's like having access to the most high-end library that you could possibly imagine, right? The ones that the people, you know, say that you used to not have access. I mean, you could, if you can hop on YouTube, you can learn the majority of what you want to for free at this point. So there's just fewer and fewer reasons to not be able to improve yourself unless you want to stereocast yourself as an individual that suffers from the fact that you're from Alabama, right? That's a horrible thing to hang your hat on. And I also think from a percentage basis, I mean, if you've got 13% of America being Black, then a very small percentage of Black people will be wealthy. But there is a percentage of wealthy Black people. I think it's probably similar across all races from a percentage standpoint. Like, you commonly hear of the top 1%. So if there's a top 1% of America, then there's also a top 1% of the 13% of the Black population. Again, I could go through a mental Rolodex of Black millionaires that I know. Not a single one of them, are sitting there cursing the fact that at one point they were from Alabama. I went on to ancestry.com probably in the past year and a half or so, and learned that my great grandfather, my dad's grandfather, was the first one on our side, born free. How incredible is that? My brother and I are millionaires now, right? My dad did a fantastic job at setting up, the framework for my brother and I, laying the foundation, providing us the stable home, right? I've never seen my mom and dad fight. They love each other. They did, everything they could to provide consistency to us, which I'm positive had a great impact on my brother and I having this foundation where we could explore the things that we wanted to, right? And now we own a business together, and I'm having the time of my life. But neither my mom, who's white, or my dad, who's Black, did they have a consistent home in their childhood. So they sought out together to have some consistency. They're the only ones that they've been married to up until recently. They've lived in one house their entire life, right? Or in my entire life. So, but even if that weren't the case, I mean, my dad had no excuses to build on. I mean, he didn't take those. He wanted to, improve himself, and subsequently he had a lot of people help him along the way. Kind of taking us back to the first part of this live stream that I was talking about how relationships are everything. Help other people solve their problems, and you'll get some value for that, meaning you'll make some money off it. Don't make it about you. Don't make it about consuming everything that you can from other people, because you're gonna run out real quick. So I don't know. Just be careful when you're reading stuff like this and how you let the narration kind of go. Don't be tricked. So that's all I've got. All righty. Any questions you might have? We've been doing this for a while now, almost 2 hours, which is a lot of fun. Longer than usual. We've been scheduling closings earlier and earlier lately. Not on purpose, just because, when you've got 7 to 9 closings in a day, then especially if all the sellers are going to show up, it's a lot of coordination and a lot of time. That's another thing that I think is pretty interesting. Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, the majority of homes that we purchase, it's not here lately we've bought the most amount of rent ready properties. But I can think of a handful of times that I know we were competing with owner occupants. But for the most part, it's always other investors, um, not owner occupants. And I think if you look at all these homes individually, there's a reason each time that an owner occupant is not necessarily the ideal person to buy that home. A lot of times there's like a really big ticket item that needs to be addressed. If you're looking for somebody, if you're somebody looking to buy a home that has the ability to, get that home and fix that big ticket item and then get a lot of equity for it, then that's absolutely what you should do. But then again, that puts you in a different category. You're not the owner occupant that's trying to like repair your credit and save up money for a down payment. If you're looking to, buy a property with a big ticket expense item, fix it, and then get that equity, because you're going to not be able to qualify for any conventional financing. You're going to have to do that with like hard money or some other type of thing, or you're going to have a lot more than just enough for the down payment in order to fix that. But you're going to have to be in a completely, like, fundamentally different space financially than this article is kind of painting. I think helping people that can't afford homes buy homes is setting them up for failure whenever these big ticket items roll around. I mean, if you're, homeownership sounds good and all, but if you're not prepared to fully rebuild that home like every 70 years, then I don't think home ownership is for you. But if you list out the lifespan of all of the things that go into the home, I mean, truly, if you have a house for 70 years, you're going to pretty much replace everything one time or another. It's not like these things are built to last like they were. It's all I've got. All righty. Well, hey, I've had a ton of fun. I really appreciate everybody. Next week, Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be right here. And yeah, bring your questions and I'll do my best to answer them. We are very close to 20,000 subscribers. I'm pretty excited about hitting that mark. We're at 19,911. So if you would love to watch me cross that 20,000 subscriber threshold, then feel free to share this channel with anybody that you think would like to improve themselves financially or become a real estate investor. All right. Next week, Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard. I will see you then.